Los chimpancés son los parientes más cercanos de los humanos, compartiendo el 98% de nuestro ADN.
Yeah, it's just
one of them? Or
Yeah.
there's a few? I can see some movement, but I can see only one.
La ciencia ha revelado cuánto compartimos con ellos y aún, al mismo tiempo, la acción humana está poniendo en riesgo su existencia. Pretendí descubrir la realidad de lo que está sucediendo con los chimpancés a lo largo de su hábitat en África y explorar la profundidad de su conexión con la humanidad. Esta es la historia de los chimpancés en nuestro planeta. El Dr. Shadrack Kamenya es el director de Ciencias de la Conservación en el Instituto Goodall en Tanzania y me guía hacia una mirada poco común de los chimpancés en su hábitat.
Chimpanzees are like us. You cannot predict what they are going to do. Sometimes they do interesting things, and that's why we researchers come and see if something new will be witnessed. They do different things every day.
Estamos en la reserva Gombe Stream en Tanzania. Para los científicos y conservacionistas que trabajan con chimpancés, este lugar es su meca. Gombe fue puesto en el escenario global en los años 60 por una mujer británica llamada Jane Goodall.
When I was a little girl growing up in England, I always loved animals and nature. So when I was 10 years old, I decided I will grow up, go to Africa, live with animals and write books about them. We had no money when I was a child, but I had a wonderful mother, and she said to me, if there's something you really want to do, you're going to have to work very hard and never give up.
Cuando Jane Goodall tenía 26 años, viajó a Tanzania para comenzar un viaje que por siempre transformaría la forma en que los humanos entienden a los chimpancés y nuestro lugar en este planeta. Jane llegó a Gombe sin ningún tipo de entrenamiento profesional como científica. Armada con una libreta y un insaciable deseo de aprender, empezó el estudio de los chimpancés que duraría 55 años. Rompiendo el protocolo científico del momento, ella le dio a todos los chimpancés en sus estudios nombres en lugar de números. Sus observaciones revelaron la estructura social compleja de las comunidades de chimpancés, el comportamiento iluminado y la inteligencia que por mucho tiempo se pensó que era dominio exclusivo de los humanos. El trabajo de Jane cautivó al mundo e inspiró a generaciones de jóvenes científicos y conservacionistas para seguir sus pasos. Muchas cosas han cambiado desde que Jane aterrizó por primera vez en Gombe. A pesar de todo lo que hemos aprendido acerca del intelecto, las emociones y la cultura de los chimpancés, sus números están disminuyendo en todo África. Los chimpancés están enfrentando amenazas que ella nunca podría haber imaginado cuando llegó por primera vez.
Back in 1960, well, definitely more than a million.
A million?
It was between 1 and 2 million. It's estimated that there are about 300 to 350,000 chimpanzees right across the continent.
In the entire Africa?
In the entire Africa. And of course, many of those are in these small fragmented forests, and small populations like that don't have much hope for long-term survival.
So are we facing the risk of bringing them to extinction?
If we don't get together and fight, yes, they could just go, because they're very slow breeders.
Like humans?
I'm afraid if we breed too fast. Chimps one baby every 5 years, and high infant mortality. Not like humans. One thing chimpanzees have not done that we have is overpopulate their environment. And we're losing them all the time.
Wow. Such a beautiful animal. It's amazing to see them in the wild, huh? He's right there. He's looking at us, actually. He was. And the little kid is coming too.
Going very fast. Now the baby will come down too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look good to watch the babies. You see they do
Now he's down.
amazing.
Look at him. The babies are so beautiful, huh? It's so similar to us.
En los últimos 40 años, la Tierra ha perdido alrededor de la mitad de su fauna. El 80% de los bosques naturales de la Tierra han sido destruidos. Un quinto de los arrecifes de coral del mundo están muertos y las especies están desapareciendo del planeta a una velocidad 100 veces más rápido de lo normal. La última extinción masiva como esta acabó con los dinosaurios. En la base de toda esta destrucción yace una especie, los humanos. Los chimpancés no han sido inmunes a esta devastación. Su número se redujo a un 80% durante el siglo pasado. La mayor amenaza para los chimpancés es la pérdida de su hábitat, causada por el crecimiento explosivo de la población humana. Shadrach me llevó a una montaña con vista a Gombe para ver cómo el desarrollo humano transformó el área.
When Dr. Jane came, all this area, which is now farmland, it was forest.
All
And
of this area?
Yes, it was forested. And most of this disappeared or was made into farmland in 1970s especially, and 1980s to 90s. When Dr. Jane came in 1960, she thought the park had 160 chimpanzees. And currently in the park we have about 90 chimpanzees. 90. Over the years from 1960 to now, a number of threats have been increasing.
Junto con Shadrach dejé atrás Gombe para descubrir las amenazas que enfrentan los chimpancés por fuera de esta reserva.
How many chimpanzees live in this area?
600.
600 chimpanzees
Yes,
in this
chimps
area.
in this area.
So why this area is not protected?
Los chimpancés se enfrentan a amenazas serias, incluyendo la pérdida de hábitat, caza furtiva, deforestación, minería y enfermedades. Aunque los chimpancés están protegidos por las CITES y otros tratados internacionales, se estima que un 75% del total de su población vive en tierras no protegidas. Como resultado, las poblaciones de chimpancés han disminuido dramáticamente durante el siglo pasado.
So we know that 6 to 8 million years ago, there was neither humans and neither chimpanzees. There was something that essentially was our common ancestor. And we have since diverged, and now they are our closest relatives.
Alex Peel es un antropólogo estadounidense que ha estudiado los chimpancés en Tanzania por más de 20 años. Él trabaja en la región Masito-Ugala, un área no protegida donde los chimpancés y otra fauna silvestre son extremadamente vulnerables.
There's a lot we can learn about our own history through studying chimpanzees, but it makes the challenge of protecting them more complicated, especially in areas where both humans and chimpanzees are sharing resources.
So you're saying that because they're so close to us, the challenge is bigger?
Yes, yes.
It should be the other way around.
One would think, but it adds a new dimension to the strategy and to the approach of ways to protect them and way to mitigate threats that we both would face with scarce resources. If you look at the data, if you look at the numbers of chimpanzees, if you look at the satellite imagery of suitable habitat, it's very demoralizing. It's very discouraging, very discouraging, yeah. And so reconciling what you want to be the reality and what the reality is probably the biggest challenge.
How would you feel in a world without chimpanzees?
Empty. It would be an empty world.
Muy cerca del campamento de Alex, fuimos testigos de los retos que enfrentan los chimpancés que viven en tierra no protegida. Mari Mavanza es la directora del programa del ecosistema Masito-Ugala del Instituto Jane Goodall. Ella trabaja con las comunidades locales para promover una coexistencia sostenible con los chimpancés en su ambiente natural.
It's been burnt by people who are encroaching for different reasons. Some of them ban because they want to have new growth of grass so they can feed their cattle. It is illegally because it's not allowed, but because it's a general land, it's like, no one is watching, so everybody will do what they want.
Ya que más humanos se han mudado al área, los incendios suceden con más frecuencia que el ciclo natural puede soportar.
Every year you pass by here, you see fire. It's very destructive, very destructive. This general land is very big and also it's not monitored. No one is watching what is happening here.
No es de extrañar que estas quemas tengan un efecto negativo en la fauna silvestre del área, inclusive en los chimpancés.
They don't want to live in open space like this, so they would run away and hide somewhere else. But also what we are seeing around is the habitat for them. There is where they find their food, there is where they live, there is where they make their nests. So they run away. And if they squeeze themselves into a small place, the life there becomes very difficult and some of them die.
Durante los mismos 100 años que la población de los chimpancés disminuyó en un 80%, la población humana en África aumentó 700%. Y la región Kigoma, alrededor de Gombe, no es la excepción. En 1967, Kigoma tenía una población humana de alrededor de 470.000 habitantes. Hoy en día tiene más de 2 millones de habitantes. Todo, desde la ganadería hasta la producción de carbón al lado de la carretera, destruye el hábitat del cual los chimpancés dependen para sobrevivir. Lamentablemente, las personas responsables frecuentemente viven en la pobreza extrema y simplemente están tratando de obtener los recursos que necesitan para sobrevivir. Viajé a un pueblo cercano con Shadrach para ver cómo el crecimiento de la población humana está impactando a los chimpancés.
We are about 2 to 2.5 kilometers away from the chimpanzee habitat. With more people, you need more food, you need more farmland. They also need the resources from the forest. And some people may decide to kill individuals, chimpanzees, by chance, by fear. When I'm hungry, all I need is food. Yes. And when I need water, all I need is water. So for them, when you talk about chimpanzees, it's not the message they want to hear. But we also need to figure out how to support them. So if we find another way to improve their socio-economics here, for not relying on the forest, for farmland, for firewood, then it's possible to save the chimpanzee habitat. Not only here, even in other places.
Mientras que la lucha para proteger a los chimpancés en la naturaleza está en marcha en África, activistas en los Estados Unidos están trabajando para proteger a los chimpancés que viven en cautiverio.
Joe lived for 17 years in a chain-link dog pen. He could barely take a few steps in either direction, and he was completely alone. When you deny these animals everything that's natural and important to them, they essentially lose their minds.
Uno de los descubrimientos más importantes de Jane en Gombe fue ser testigo de que los chimpancés exhiben un comportamiento que se pensaba era exclusivamente humano: hacer y usar herramientas. Jane vio a un chimpancé llamado David Barbagris rompiendo las hojas de las ramas y luego usando las ramas para desenterrar termitas del suelo para comer. Después de aprender de este descubrimiento, el mentor de Jane, el Dr. Louis Leakey, célebremente dijo: ahora tenemos que redefinir la herramienta, redefinir el hombre o aceptar a los chimpancés como seres humanos. Los chimpancés y los humanos difieren en menos del 2% de su ADN. Los chimpancés ríen cuando les hacen cosquillas, sacuden su cabeza para decir no, pelean cuando los molestan y se reconcilian con un abrazo y un beso. En cautiverio, los chimpancés continúan demostrando su similitud con los humanos, desarrollando signos de depresión, estrés postraumático y otros trastornos psiquiátricos. Quizás es la similitud que los chimpancés comparten con los humanos lo que ha llevado a su explotación.
Joe was born in 1989. He was born in captivity. For the first 10 years of his life, he lived with a notorious animal trainer cited by the USDA for horrible abuses of great apes and other animals.
Brittany Pitt es la directora de la aplicación de la Ley de Animales Cautivos en PETA. Como abogada y activista de los derechos de los animales, lucha por liberar a los animales que se mantienen en cautiverio. Me reuní con ella en Save the Chimps, el santuario de chimpancés más grande del mundo, donde cientos de chimpancés viven sus días en un entorno lo más similar posible a su verdadero hogar.
When he was 10, he transferred Joe to the Mobile Zoo in Alabama, and Joe lived there for 17 years in a chain-link dog pen. He could barely take a few steps in either direction, and that was his life for 17 years, and he was completely alone. When you deny these animals everything that's natural and important to them, they essentially lose their minds.
La realidad es que el caso de Joe es muy común, con cerca de 1000 chimpancés que todavía viven en instalaciones biomédicas y zoológicos no autorizados en todo Estados Unidos. En el 2015, el Departamento de Pesca y Vida Silvestre de los Estados Unidos anunció que la ley de especies en peligro de extinción se ampliaría para incluir a todos los chimpancés, tanto cautivos como salvajes. Esto le dio a Brittany y a PETA los argumentos que necesitaban para casos como el de Joe.
We've been fighting on behalf of Joe. The first thing that we did on the day that captive chimpanzees became protected, we initiated an Endangered Species Act lawsuit on behalf of Joe.
A los 3 meses de presentar la demanda, Brittany logró asegurar la liberación de Joe. Ella viajó a Alabama para acompañarlo en su traslado al santuario Save the Chimps en Fort Pierce, Florida.
So we found out the day before that Jane was going to be in Gainesville, Florida for a speaking engagement. So we worked it out. We met Jane at her hotel, and Jane was able to spend time with Joe, talking to him and observing him. We arrived at Save the Chimps late that night. Joe was released into his temporary indoor quarantine enclosure, and the first thing that he did was climb. And he'd been denied the opportunity to do that for at least 17 years, maybe for his whole life.
En los 5 meses en que Joe ha estado viviendo en Save the Chimps, su vida se ha transformado.
That's Joe. Yeah, that's Joe. When he was rescued, his forearms and his calves were completely bald, and most of the hair has grown back.
Han pasado meses desde que Brittany lo vio por última vez.
It's incredible. He looks like a different chimp. He just looks like a completely different chimp. He's completely transformed in just 5 months, not only physically, but socially. By bringing these lawsuits on behalf of captive chimpanzees is just bringing light to how intelligent these animals are and how social and how unique they are. That helps us to prevent wild chimpanzees from ever being imported into the United States again. Hopefully it also helps encourage people to support conservation efforts to keep chimpanzees in the wild. They have a chance if we really want to save them.
Chimpanzees have feelings like we do. They have personalities. They feel happiness. They can be angry, they can be vindictive, but they also have love and compassion.
The ecosystem that supports them is the ecosystem that supports us. If they go, then what next? Maybe it's us.
Las amenazas que enfrentan los chimpancés nunca habían sido mayores, y los desafíos que enfrentan los conservacionistas pueden parecer imposibles. Jane cree que educar y empoderar a la juventud de hoy es esencial para el futuro de nuestro planeta. En 1991, Jane inició una organización llamada Roots and Shoots desde una clase en Tanzania. Hoy, Roots and Shoots está en más de 130 países y tiene cerca de 150,000 miembros.
55 years ago, I went to Gombe and started studying the chimpanzees. And my best days of my whole life were when I was out in the forest by myself with the chimpanzees. So the reason I left the life I love is because I found out that chimpanzee numbers were dropping. And I went to other parts of Africa, DRC and over there, and it was the same everywhere.
Mientras que la situación de los chimpancés es urgente, ver a estos niños cautivados por las historias de Jane es una razón de esperanza.
We live in a world where everything is interconnected and every species has some role to play. We're just beginning to discover there's an awful lot we have left to learn. And chimpanzees, in a way, in this part of the world are symbolic. If chimpanzees disappear, that means that we're not protecting the wildlife in the forest. And we never know when a species disappears what knock-off effect that will have. And there are examples of one species going, and that can lead to the destruction of a whole ecosystem. So these are the kind of things that's important for the children to learn. But also, chimpanzees have feelings like we do. They have personalities. They're highly intelligent. They have emotions. And that's really important. It's not just the chimpanzees, it's other animals too.
They feel pain and fear.
They feel pain, they feel fear, they feel happiness. They can be angry, they can be vindictive. They can make war of a sort, but they also have love and compassion and altruism.
El trabajo de Jane continúa inspirando a cientos de miles alrededor del mundo. Pero mientras las amenazas enfrentadas por los chimpancés sigan creciendo, el trabajo para salvarlos es cada vez más difícil.
The only reason that chimpanzees like Joe continue to be held in roadside zoos is because people continue buying tickets to roadside zoos. If the public took a stand and stopped supporting these industries, we could end this tomorrow.
If we work hard, if the people, if the government will understand and see the value of chimpanzees and chimpanzee habitat, then the chimpanzees will continue to be there even 200 years from now. The ecosystem that supports them is the ecosystem that supports us. If we let the forest go, it means also our watershed, our rivers, our streams will also suffer. If they go, then what next? Maybe it's us, it's human species that will go.
They're important to learn about the history of our own species, where we came from, how we got here. They're important because they're a charismatic species, and if you protect a keystone species like chimpanzees, lots of other animals are protected along the way. They're important to protect for the intrinsic value that they're another wild animal. And so in some ways they're just as important as lots of other species. But because they're an indicator species, if chimpanzees are there, it's highly likely lots of other species are there. That's a good reason to protect the entire habitat.
I think if we lose the chimps, about whom we're still learning, we sort of lose a little piece of understanding of our own evolution. And they are our closest genetic relative. That's symbolic of something. Our humanity is diminished because we don't care.